Proprioceptors, nervous inhibition. The antagonistic muscle in the antagonistic pair are inhibited, which stops them contracting to a bigger degree after resistance training is done because of the adaptations of the nervous system. This means that the agonist and the synergist muscles can carry on contracting more forcibly. Training can decrease nervous inhibition, which is a response of the central nervous system to feedback sent from the muscle tissue. This means that you can work and stretch your muscles further. Nervous inhibition prevents the muscle from overworking and ripping or tearing as the muscle is taking on a lot of force or weight which it is not used to. The muscle spindle apparatus is a stretch receptor in the muscle which detects changes in length of the muscle and stops it from overstretching. The stretch reflex is activated when the proprioceptors detect too much stretch or force on a tendon and send feedback to the central nervous system through the afferent nerve fibers. This improves performance because it stops injuries, which means that my striker can train for longer and play without an injury. Neural pathway transmission efficiency. Some of the changes are cellular adaptations, modifications of neurotransmitters, alterations in reflex and biochemical responses. For example, sprint training produces relatively small metabolic changes, but it has quite substantial effects on performance. Cellular adaptations are changes within the cell structures. For example, mitochondrials will increase in size, which makes a larger or stronger muscle contractions, resulting in a better performance. FG fibers hypertrophy is where the fibers increase in size because of resistance training. The hypertrophy often occurs because of lots of anaerobic high intensity exercise. Helps to increase the muscle size from training because of the increased resistance, and the cross-sectional size of the FG fibers increases and there's more of them, which means a larger contraction. An increase in aerobic enzymes means there's an increase in the number and the size of the mitochondria. There's normally also an increase in the level of aerobic system enzymes, which enhances the ability of slow-twitch muscles to generate ATP. Therefore, my striker can sustain prolonged periods of aerobic exercise like jogging for 90 minutes. The use of fats as an energy source occurs during low-intensity exercise. Fat combustion powers almost all exercise, which is around 25% of aerobic power. Fat oxidation increases if exercise extends to over an hour because glycogen levels deplete. After an hour, 75% of total energy required is done by fats. Lactic acid can inhibit energy production because it inhibits the enzymes which help with energy production. A higher lactate threshold. There's a higher lactate threshold in athletes who have trained, as you can see in the bottom right image. Trained athletes have a higher lactate threshold. This is because long-term exercise can lead to an ability to exhale more carbon dioxide during intense exercise, which delays which is onset of blood lactate accumulation, which means that you can do higher intensity exercise without lactate accumulation, so you can work for longer without getting fatigue from lactic acid, which means my striker performance will be better because he'll be able to stay at the same intensity for longer without fatiguing. There is lower lactate production and a higher lactate clearance. This process causes RER to go over 1, and there is an improved performance, as I said before, because we can breathe in more oxygen, so there's more oxygen to muscles, so they can work for longer without fatiguing. Glycogen sparring is where you use non-carbohydrates for energy during exercise, so the depletion of muscle glycogen stores is delayed. If fat makes a bigger contribution to an athlete's efforts during the initial stages of a race, then more glycogen will be available and fatigue will be delayed. Therefore, my striker can compete at the same intensity for longer so that his performance levels won't drop. Lactic acid inhibits the energy productions, as I said, which means performance will drop because there's less energy and my striker will fatigue quicker. Energy system adaptations, anaerobic. So as you can see in the bottom left, and the top right, it's the Wingate test, which is an anaerobic exercise test done on a stationary bike usually, and it measures peak anaerobic power and anaerobic capacity. Anaerobic power is a measure of the ATP PC system. The left image shows the graph of someone completing. The top right image, shows the graph of someone completing the Wingate test. As the time goes up, power in watts decreases as they start to fatigue. Their peak power is around 675, and it takes them about 10 seconds to reach this. For player A in the bottom image, whereas player B in the bottom image has a peak power of 1092 watts. It takes player A 6.03 seconds to reach peak power and player B 2.6 seconds. But this results in player B having a much higher fatigue level because they have used up more of the ATP-PC system, so more has depleted. And the top right system shows an image also of the Wingate test, so as you can see, their power is highest at about 672. The anaerobic system also has changes. An example is an increase in the intramuscular levels of ATP, and there are more enzymes which control the anaerobic phase of glucose breakdown. My striker can do more short, sharp sprints because of this, and then there's more energy to maintain the same intensity. An adaptation of strength training is particularly an increase in the muscle cells being able to store more phosphocreatine, which means that my striker can do more short bursts of high intensity exercise like shooting or sprinting. A high store of phosphocreatine means that my striker can sprint about 400 meters. PC supplementation. The top right image is a graph of the Wingate test, like I said before, but of someone pre-training who had done the Wingate test. Post-training, their maximum power would be much higher because the training means that their power will increase, and therefore they won't fatigue as easily because their power will be higher. So for my striker, if he trains, his energy system adaptations will mean that he'll have a higher peak power and a higher anaerobic capacity. PC supplementation is a legal and effective supplement that acts on your phosphocreatine system. It helps muscular strength and short-term power, perfect for my strikers to short-term sprints and shooting. You take it by taking 5 grams of creatine monohydrate with 400 milliliters of water or a protein shake just after training. The advantages are that it gives you a high intensity of work, which means that you can increase strength, and it increases anaerobic capacity and helps recovery, and it will improve performance. But the negatives are that it causes bloating, and there's an increase in metabolites, which means that there's more stress on the bladder and kidneys. Basal metabolic is the rate at which the body uses energy while at rest to maintain vital functions like breathing and keeping warm. Training will help to speed up my striker's basal metabolic rate because the body will burn more calories at rest, and therefore my striker will have more muscle and a faster basal metabolic rate, which will improve his performance because he'll lose less energy and tire and fatigue slower, so that he doesn't have to drop his intensity. Skeletal system adaptation. Weight-bearing exercise will increase bone width, density, and strength, and it causes micro tears in the muscle, and body adapts by regenerating new tissue, which is mostly made up of collagen. It also suppresses the osteoclast activity, which means that the athlete will have a healthy bone density. Osteoblasts migrate or all go to the surface of the bone, which means that it will become more dense, so that new cells can be made at the outer layer, which is the periosteum, and the role of the osteoblast is to carry out or complete ossification, which turns fibrous tissue into bone. Osteoclasts destroy bone and they reabsorb calcium, and they are very important in bone remodeling because they contribute to regulating bone growth. The osteoblasts help increase. The fact that osteoblasts increase bone width, density, and strength means that there's less risk of injury because you can cope with high strain and prevent osteoporosis. Range of movement. Flexibility training, like stretching and pulling arms back, will improve flexibility in a larger range of movement. This will help my striker stretch for tackles and the ball more, and avoid muscle injuries when doing this. As you can see in the top right image, it shows the structure of an osteoblast and an osteocyte, and there's an osteoclast. And the bottom right image shows tendon and ligament, which, if you train regularly, then your ligaments and cartilage will get stronger because there's less chance of sprain in your ligaments and less friction on the bones of your cartilage and less chance for injury, which will help my striker's performance because he's going to miss less training sessions, which means he'll be more adapted for games. And however, over training on cartilage can cause osteoarthritis, which is where the joint cartilage is degenerated and the underlying bone, and it's most common in middle-aged people and older, and it causes pain and stiffness, normally in the hip, knee, and thumb joints. Aerobic skeletal system adaptation, long distance run like marathon running, that sort of thing, will stimulate brain cell production.